Thank you for joining us for our 10th annual Stolen Youth Luncheon. Please welcome to the stage Northwest Tap Connection to perform Rise Up.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I rise up, I rise like the day. I rise up, I rise unafraid. I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And I rise up, I like the waves. I rise up, in spite of the ache. I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move mountains, and I'll rise up. I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. And we will rise, we will rise, we will rise. We'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, I like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. You.
Hello. Hi, everybody. What a phenomenal way to welcome you back. And it is so amazing to see everybody here today who's joining us to celebrate the work of StolenYouth. It's my privilege to chair the board. My name is Kara Hurst, and to work alongside our incredibly talented staff, all of our supporters, and our board of directors. It's so great to see everybody here in the room, and a special appreciation to those of you who have been supporting our work at StolenYouth for so many years. To see so many of our elected officials in the room today, and the folks that really work with us throughout the community day in and day out to keep our community thriving. If the past 2 years have taught us anything, it's adaptability. As we continue to navigate these last few years of a pandemic and global turmoil, StolenYouth's commitment to ending child sex trafficking has not wavered. In fact, it has grown stronger. In the face of rising cases of youth sexual exploitation online, the need for survivor support, prevention, education, and advocacy for our youth has never been more urgent. Our coalition of direct service organizations to whom we provide consistent financial support persists on the front lines of this fight to end exploitation and trafficking of our most vulnerable and marginalized youth. So as we celebrate 10 years of the anniversary of StolenYouth, 10 years, a decade, yes. We are also celebrating each and every one of you who has been with us along that journey. There is a meaning to milestones that we celebrate in our lives. And for any nonprofit, a decade is quite an achievement. Our work is needed, it's imperative, and it's having an impact. Milestones have a way of bringing us clarity in life, and what we are is absolutely crystal clear about today, that we've built a solid foundation on which we will continue to grow. I have never been more excited about the future of StolenYouth, our partners, and the impact of our work. So we'll take inspiration from this event from past years and where we've expanded our impact recently beyond King County to provide funding for smaller organizations, such as Scarlet Road, which is based in Kitsap County, to hire a youth outreach position, and our work with the Foundation for Youth Resiliency and Engagement, or FIRE, that many of you are familiar with, that is located in Okanagan County, the largest county in Washington, with 70% of its land occupied by the Colville Indian Reservation. So our funding will allow FIRE to hire a youth advocate and conduct a landscape analysis to ensure their services are meeting the most critical needs of youth in the county. And StolenYouth plays a really vital role in organizations like these, providing a safety net for their imperative work. Additionally, we're really proud of the community advocacy work that StolenYouth has funded this year through our Bridge Collaborative, a partnership between organizations committed to fighting against sex trafficking, to share best practices, case consultation, training, and community for commercially sexually exploited children, advocates across King County. So we cannot thank you enough for being an integral part of the creation of StolenYouth, the continued support, and part of the solution which we're working towards. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Laura Slepsky. Laura is a phenomenal member of our community, a strong supporter of organizations focused on women and children, and she and her husband Adam have been longtime supporters of StolenYouth. So I'm thrilled to welcome you, Laura, to the stage to continue our program with an exciting announcement. Thank you so much.
First, I want to say, wow, that tap dance was incredible. Thank you to Northwest Tap. Thank you, Kara. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon on this beautiful, beautiful Wednesday to celebrate 10 years of work by StolenYouth and the immense impact you and your partners have had on the Seattle community. I attended my first StolenYouth Luncheon back in 2014, invited by a friend. And I'm very happy to show my support again today. StolenYouth's unique coalition model enables it to support a diverse array of organizations, projects, and programs that all touch on aspects of the issue of child sex trafficking here in Washington and beyond. This excellent organization touches the lives of so many children and young adults who need both care and empowerment. I'm thrilled to announce to you that Amazon shared that it has chosen StolenYouth as a new community partner this year and is donating an additional challenge match grant of up to $50,000 to focus on building out its program infrastructure. It's very exciting, but there's more. I know these funds will enable vital services for trafficked youth, as well as research and prevention efforts. I hope that you will donate today in an effort to double the impact and reach 100,000 together. StolenYouth needs all of our support to do the great work that is so important for our youth and our community. We look forward to thinking big today with StolenYouth, and so hopefully you will too. Thank you.
Ten years ago, Kelly Clarkson topped the charts with Stronger. NCIS was the #1 show on television. Touch control, mobile payments, and television everywhere were the latest technology inventions. And fortunately, child sex trafficking was beginning to get noticed from the very top.
Of course, no government, no nation can meet this challenge alone. Everybody has a responsibility. Every nation can take action. Modern anti-trafficking laws must be passed and enforced. And justice systems must be strengthened. Victims must be cared for. So here in the United States, Congress should renew the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Whether you are conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, this is a no-brainer. This is something we should all agree on. We need to get that done.
At the same time, 13 women turned their passion to end child sex trafficking globally to their own community, Seattle. And what began as a dream to build a house for child sex trafficking victims became a much, much bigger idea. A decade ago, StolenYouth was born as the leading nonprofit organization with a coalition model for the nation to follow, with a mission to end child sex trafficking in Washington state, and with ideas that turned into action. But the hill was steep. Communities across the country, including Seattle, were in denial that child sex trafficking even existed. To break through this denial, StolenYouth held their first Not on Our Watch luncheon in 2013, and the community responded. 700 people attended, raising an astonishing $700,000. Working in partnership with community and government leaders, law enforcement, and coalition partners, change started to come to Seattle and across the country. In 2013, King County began to focus their efforts on combating child sex trafficking, from charging minors with prostitution to charging patrons with trying to buy sex with minors. And in 2013, the charges against patrons in King County increased by roughly 330%. In 2018, sex-trafficked youth reaching out to community advocates increased from 55% to 95%. And those maintaining consistent contact with the advocate doubled, increasing from 35% to 67%. That same year, Backpage.com was seized by government agencies, and Craigslist removed its personal section. Both sites were used to facilitate sex trafficking of children. In January of 2020, the White House hosted a summit of human trafficking, honoring the 20th anniversary of the TVPA, during which the president signed the Executive Order 13903 on combating human trafficking and online child exploitation in the United States. And thanks to our partners, supporters, and donors, the results have been astounding. In the last decade, in our community, 15,000 buyer transactions have been disrupted. 3,000 students have been educated about sex trafficking prevention. A 24-hour response collaborative for trafficking victims needing emergency services was established. Since 2013, over 950 referrals of children who were either at risk of or who were being actively exploited were made to the King County CSEC Task Force. Since 2015, there have been 0 prostitution charges against minors in King County. While we have seen many significant wins over the past decade, we still have work to do. Disproportionately, white adult men are buying black young girls. Between 2019 to 2020, cases filed by the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office showed a 162% increase in identified child sex trafficking victims. We cannot stop now. We must stay vigilant to prevent, connect, and empower. Let's turn the next decade into the decade where we end child sex trafficking.
Good afternoon. Now, I know you guys haven't been out with others in a long time, but good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Nick Brown. I am the United States Attorney for Western Washington. It is my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. First off, I want to thank all of the staff and volunteers and workers who are here today putting on this wonderful opportunity for us to gather. Thank you to everyone who put in the hard work. And ladies and gentlemen of this entire Stolen Youth community, it is my profound honor, pleasure, and privilege to be with you here today. First, it is my honor to be speaking with you about this particular challenge that we have and this group of advocates and volunteers. Few organizations have shown such unwavering commitment to tackling the challenge of child sex trafficking. Few organizations have led not only with their resources, not only with their heart, but with their action around this issue. And so I'm excited to be here today to talk about the challenge that we face together. It is my pleasure to be with you in person, to see your faces. I actually hugged a couple people. This is something that we cannot do via Zoom, via WebEx, God forbid, Teams. The opportunity to build community together in person. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about community and how both individuals and community can use their voices to tackle this challenge. And it is my privilege to be with this audience and to be with you in person to talk about something so important, even in the face of these incredible challenges, even in the face of the trauma of child sex trafficking. And that important thing is the difference between optimism and hope. The difference between optimism and hope. And so we're going to talk about that today. Are you with me? All right. I can't see everybody. It's dark up here, but I'm glad to be with you. So let's talk about the challenge a little bit. As U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Washington, I am the chief federal law enforcement official for this district, from the Canadian border down to Oregon and across to the mountains. And in this position, I have a unique opportunity to become familiar with an array of criminal activity, including child sex trafficking. And child sex trafficking is challenging and difficult in a myriad of ways. First and foremost, it is incredibly difficult to measure. to get a handle on the scope of this problem. Studies estimate that child sex trafficking cases every year range from anywhere from 100,000 cases to upwards to 3 million in the United States. Second, its victims are some of the least powerful and most vulnerable of the types of cases that we deal with. And it is challenging to identify all of the perpetrators and to bring them to justice. But despite this immense challenge, there is incredible work being done by not only organizations such as StolenYouth and all of their partners, but by the law enforcement community and prosecutors' offices across this state. The King County Prosecutor's Office has led on this issue for many years, and I give great thanks to the work that they've done for many, many years on this issue. And not only King County, but other county prosecutors' offices across this state and the Department of Justice have been engaged in tackling child sex trafficking for a number of years. And so I want to give you 3 examples of some of the cases that my office has been engaged in over the past few years. And they help show you a little bit about the nature of the problem and how it has transitioned in a very short period of time. 5 years ago, we convicted a man who used Backpage.com when it still existed. And he was using other social media sites to recruit and traffic child sex victims. And once he had lured these victims to the Seattle area, he forced these victims through physical violence, through coercion, through fraud, to engage in prostitution, not only in Washington state, but 7 other states. He would fly these victims all throughout the Southwest, eventually abandoning them in California, where they were encouraged to report to law enforcement and did. And that individual was arrested and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Backpage.com was subsequently shut down by the department and other federal agencies. Just a few years ago, we prosecuted another man that had targeted vulnerable young women and children, claiming to be a famous film producer with a big contract from HBO. And he was going to produce, according to him, a documentary about prostitution. He actually showed and enticed his victims false bank statements, false communications with HBO, took a picture of himself in front of the HBO office in California to bolster up this fraud that he was committing. He actually had these victims sign false contracts that promised them money for participating in this documentary about prostitution. And once these victims arrived from all over the country here in Seattle, he coerced them into prostituting themselves for his profit. He manipulated them emotionally, physically, sexually. He isolated them, made them feel like he was their only source of hope and opportunity. He was charged after a victim was encouraged to come forward and report what had happened to her. He was then tried and convicted of 33 years in prison. And just a few months ago, my office identified another man in Seattle who had a full-time job as a real estate agent. On the side, and like so many others before him, he is accused of coercing and forcing young women into prostitution, right up here on Aurora Avenue, on the Blade, as they call it. An area that has been once again flourishing with child sex prostitution, flourishing during the height of COVID. He's also accused of attempting to lure underage girls via social media from out of state into Washington. But thankfully, due to a tip to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, his conduct was reported, and now he is facing at least 10 years in prison for his conduct. I wanted to highlight these 3 cases for a particular reason, and they show some very important things. First, sex trafficking, including child sex trafficking, an absolutely horrible and tragic crime, is at its base very, very simple. It is not a big, complex operation. At its base, it involves principally individual men who prey on the most vulnerable, who coerce the most vulnerable, the young, the abused, the neglected, the forgotten. Their tactics of abuse and coercion are as old as time, but they continue today. Second, these cases and others highlight the importance of social media and the internet as a tool for their crimes. So many of the investigations that come to my office or come to King County and other county prosecutors' offices come because we have identified conduct on Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. Social media continues to be a dangerous tool for these individuals to lure their victims into conduct and to advertise their services for others. And lastly, and most importantly for this group here today, these cases highlight what happens when both victims and supporters use their voices to report these crimes, use their voices to bring attention to the nature of this problem, and use their voices to support the victims of these crimes once they've been removed from these horrible situations. I often tell people that the best thing my parents ever taught me was to give a damn. Not just to work hard, not just to be kind to others, not just to do the right thing, but to give a damn. And so many of these crimes are stopped because people in the community started to give a damn about what was happening around them. By providing aid and comfort to the victims, by reporting the crimes to the police, by supporting organizations like StolenYouth, who are advocating on their behalf. The voices of individuals and the collective community can have a powerful impact if they give a damn. Over the past year, as I was going through the process of being nominated for United States U.S. Attorney, which is not a process I would wish upon anyone. But all throughout that process, people would always ask me, why do you want to be U.S. Attorney? Why do you want to be U.S. Attorney? It's a simple question, but one that required me to think a lot. And I had lots of answers, that I was excited about being re-engaged in doing criminal justice, that I loved working in this office that I now run as a line prosecutor many years ago, that the opportunity to interface with the community on a different level was appealing to me. But the reason for me wasn't really crystallized until I'd been in office for a few months, and I started to read about the difference between hope and optimism. Hope and optimism, oftentimes used as synonyms in our common parlance. But people tend to get these confused, and so as I studied up on the difference between these two things, it really crystallized why I love what I do. Optimism focuses broadly on the expected quality of outcomes, the belief that things will turn out all right, a focus on the positive over the negative, no matter what. And I am an optimist. But hope is different. Hope focuses more directly on the specific attainment of goals. In other words, hope makes no assumption that things will simply get better, but it is a belief, a conviction that things will get better if we act. Hope requires some agency by the individual to make things better. And what I realized in reading about the distinction between hope and optimism is that while I am an optimist, the Department of Justice, the courthouse right across the street where I work at every day, our mission, all give me great hope. Hope that we can improve people's lives, hope that we can make our community safe, hope that we can change the arc of justice for the good. And perhaps more importantly, I remain hopeful in the face of these obstacles and the daunting challenge that we face from all the crimes that we engage in, but particularly around crimes so troubling as child sex trafficking. I remain hopeful because there are organizations that can make a difference through their actions, through their resources, through their commitment. And if you and I commit ourselves to tackling sex trafficking, if we commit ourselves to giving a damn about what happens around us, we will make a difference. Thank you very much.
Over the past decade, Stolen Youth has been the leading nonprofit organization focused exclusively on ending child sex trafficking in Washington state. Child sex trafficking is a complex issue. To make meaningful impact, it takes a team of individuals and organizations working together to prevent child sex trafficking before it happens, connect victims with resources and services, and empower positive and productive lives. That's the Stolen Youth way. Stolen Youth's coalition has become a model for the country. Working together in partnership and providing targeted funding to these leading organizations and experts. Together, we have a higher likelihood of making significant impact in the fight against child sex trafficking by being in the right place at the right time. Predators are relentless. They are creative and have adapted to technology and media, and they do everything in their power to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Because they have been so relentless, the first step is prevention. Over the past 10 years, Stolen Youth has worked with frontline partners using innovative technology and education to raise awareness and combat these predators, reducing the opportunity for child sex trafficking to occur in the first place.
Freedom Signal is a web application that local advocates and survivor-led organizations are able to use to directly serve individuals who are potentially being trafficked or exploited online. Freedom Signal has scraped over 12 million online ads. Our partners have been able to use our platform to send almost 3,000 bulk text outreach campaigns and have sent over 137,000 text messages to individuals who are being exploited and trafficked. The support of Stolen Youth has contributed to the sustainability of our ongoing work to prioritize prevention, intervention, and ultimately community transformation to end trafficking and exploitation.
Project Sugar Free is a piece of software that is designed to drive action against people who are looking to solicit sex from minors online and people who are looking for monetary recompense for sex. Stolen Youth empowered this project by funding the initial development of the software, by us using their expertise and their resources to develop content that we knew would be effective. And finally, they even got in and helped manage part of the software in the beginning stages. The fact that we got to bring Project Sugar Free to life and save lives is something I will forever be grateful for Stolen Youth and their efforts.
In Washington state, it is estimated that between 500 and 700 children are trafficked. The average age of a child who enters child sex trafficking is 14 years old, and on average, a child spends 2 years being trafficked. 2 years of innocence that these children will never get back. To help these kids get out of the life and connected to necessary resources through our experts and partners, Stolen Youth funds advocates and programs to reach these kids where they are.
At Innovations, we use advocates in a multitude of different ways. One of the most important ways that we use the advocates is to work directly with our clients, to build that relationship with the client so we can have that baseline trust. We also build a safety plan, a plan around self-determined progress that the client wants to make.
Advocates support connections for trafficking victims in a large range of ways. Relationship is the intervention. And in part that is because young people who've experienced trafficking have been let down by a lot of people. So relationship has to be front and center. When reflecting on the last 10 years in partnership with Stolen Youth, we've really been able to learn and grow together. They come to the service providers and the stakeholders in the community and say, how do we work together to move the needle farther, faster, so that there's less suffering and exploitation in our community?
The trauma endured by survivors of child sex trafficking lasts a lifetime. To help survivors have the best opportunity for their second chance, Stolen Youth has worked with coalition partners to connect them to counseling, career, and job training, providing a springboard to a productive and rewarding life.
One of the biggest barriers for people to be able to exit the sex trade is a lack of other employment opportunities. The Safe Jobs Collaborative that we run at Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking is a program that helps survivors and folks who are at risk of human trafficking to get connected with employment. Thanks to the support from StolenYouth, last year we were able to help 169 people, coaching them and preparing them for employment. And 85 of those folks were able to go on and get employment here in our region.
The Jenny Fund has supported survivors with expenses like rent support, bills that they don't have the capacity at the moment to cover, so that they could focus on other goals, whether that looks like obtaining more stable housing, going back to school, or reconnecting with their family. Since REST has been in partnership with StolenYouth, the Jenny Fund has been a tremendous support to survivors.
Our first 10 years has set the pace in the fight against child sex trafficking. We've accomplished so much, yet still have so much more to do. But we will get there. By locking arms with our partners and with the support and investment of our incredible donors, together over this next decade, we will continue to prevent child sex trafficking before it happens. We will connect victims to vital resources and services, and we will empower survivors to positive and productive lives. We do all of this because no child should be bought or sold for sex.
Whew. I have to shake off the COVID cobwebs. It's been a while since I've been on a stage. But I have to say, I was so excited this morning to see everybody in person. And I hugged a lot of people. I'm so sorry. I'm super healthy. Tested. But I want to thank you all for coming out. I know it's not easy. I know we're all sort of finding our way back in person, and it just means a lot to us to have you here, especially for our 10-year anniversary. It's been an incredible journey, as you all know. We've learned so much in these 10 years, but we've come full circle at this moment. It's my honor and privilege to introduce Nacole and Jessika as our keynote speakers. Nacole was our first speaker at our very first luncheon way back when. And Jessika bravely stood on this stage a few years after that. They are remarkable heroes and mentors for us in this fight against child trafficking. From their stories, we learned that sex trafficking can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone's family, in anyone's backyard. They showed us what courage looked like in the face of unimaginable trauma, and to fight and advocate for those that don't have a voice. They just got back into the fight, and we are still learning so much from them. I'm so looking forward to you hearing their stories, their journey, their recovery, and their current advocacy today. It is my pleasure to welcome Nacole and Jessika to the stage.
Hello. Oh, come on, you guys can do better than that. Hi. Well, like she said, my name is Jessika, and I am a survivor of child sex trafficking. And I just want to take a minute to tell you my story. I was an average 15-year-old with average teenage problems, and after being bullied at school, I decided to run away. Statistics show that a child, when they run away, is usually approached within 24 hours of being gone. And that's exactly what happened to me. Within 24 hours, I was approached, tricked, and handed over to my trafficker. Growing up, my mom had always told me that if I was in a situation of danger, to not go to a man, but find a woman and she would help me. And it's still hard for me to believe that the person who approached me that day and handed me over to my trafficker was in fact a woman. She was a friend that I thought I had found amid being so lost and broken, and yet she was the beginning of the end to the life that I knew. These traffickers know what they are doing, and they view young girls as commodities that they can sell, and I was just one of the endless streams of young girls that they pulled into this life. It may be hard for you to believe that I was trafficked twice, but it's important for me to share with you the emotional and psychological chains that came over me when I was subjected to this kind of lifestyle. The first time I was trafficked was for 10 days, but that's all it took for them to break me. Those who are familiar with human trafficking would coin this time as grooming. Grooming is defined as the process traffickers use to control and manipulate someone into human trafficking. Although the specific actions are different, traffickers usually follow the 4 same steps. They gain a victim's trust, they provide the victim's needs, and then they isolate the victim and force them into trafficking. Again, my situation was no different. I had been handed over to a man who took care of me, to control me, in order to sell me. He used everything I shared with him against me to brainwash me. For example, I'm a Christian, and he would pull out the Bible and read it. At first, it was a way that we bonded, and then he twisted and spun the words ever so strategically to make me believe this was all part of God's plan. If it wasn't the Bible, it was my dream to go to California or something else that I had shared with him in confidence. Now, there wasn't a specific moment when things took a dramatic turn. Instead, it was all the little moments that added up to my downfall. I missed the red flags and let little uncomfortable moments and situations pass me by. But they all added up to my grooming. And at 15, what did I know about anything? Much less how I was being manipulated. I couldn't understand it until it was too late. And once he had my trust, he instilled fear in me. And once I was afraid, he isolated me. In my mind, I felt entirely alone. And then he stole my identity by taking my dignity. I went into survival mode, and I didn't want any excuse for him to get physical. And so after 10 days, the police had found me when I had escaped from his garage. Even though I was rescued, the Jessika that I was before I ran away was gone. The world I had once known was broken, and as I went through such an immense amount of trauma in such a short amount of time, I felt like everything I had once known was gone. I felt like I was covered in germs that would never be washed off. And as you can imagine, my return brought turmoil to my family. My parents did everything that they could think of and took all the right steps. We went to the hospital, filed a report, but there was a lack of resources and tools to help me recover from the trauma I had undergone. And it led me right back into the arms of my traffickers 3 months later. Stockholm Syndrome is a condition which causes hostages to develop a psychological attachment to their captors during captivity. These attachments result from a bond formed between captors and captives during intimate time spent together, but they're entirely irrational to the light of day to anyone who's not a victim. And all it took for me to end up back in the life was another empty promise from my captor. Those 10 days created an emotional tie and formed an invisible allegiance to the life that I was sold into. The woman who originally approached me told me that she had tickets to go to California together. Instead, she took me back to a trafficker. And the second time, I was trafficked for 108 days, just 20 minutes from my parents' home. This time, I became totally numb. I accepted that I was going to die in this life and in this pain, and I completely lost faith in humanity. I felt like I was the only one enduring this suffering, while in fact, this was happening to millions of people all over the world. My story, while daunting, is also about the hope of recovery. I share my story so that others can understand that this can happen to anyone in the blink of an eye. Just 10 days. Male, female, black, white, any nationality, rich or poor. Anyone. And even scarier is the reality is that no one is off limits to the dangers of human trafficking, and that the traffickers will stop at nothing. Human trafficking wouldn't exist if the demand didn't exist. We spend a lot of time talking about the traffickers, rightfully so, but too often we overlook the person buying another person for sex. It's often thought that the men buying from traffickers are a certain kind of bad guy. The truth is that people buying me came from all walks of life and all kinds of backgrounds. In my experience, most of the men I was trafficked to were white males from their early 20s to their late 50s. From frat parties to hotel rooms, from doctors to lawyers, to men carrying briefcases or watching their children who would wait in the other room. Those perpetrators did not care at all what they were doing or to whom they were doing it. They only had one objective. I am lucky there were good people who came along my path and brought hope into my hopeless situation. Like the detective who recovered me on the sting on the 108th day, and the fellow survivor and advocate who helped me see the truth of what had really happened to me. My mom, whose love and care and endless support has helped me and guided me through the subsequent 10 years of dealing with and healing through this horrible trauma. And through our advocacy and involvement in the fight to end child sex trafficking. With hope, I couldn't have seen the truth or had the strength to reach recovery and breakthrough. So let me introduce you to my amazing mother, who has worked tirelessly by my side to help me and countless others caught in the cycle of child sex trafficking. Nacole, thank you.
Once again, it is so good to be in a room full of people at a Stolen Youth event. I would first like to thank Jess so much, and Patty and the Stolen Youth Committee for inviting us back here today. I say inviting us back because, as Patty stated, I was one of the first speakers here 10 years ago, and how far we have come in those last 10 years. And Jessika, not long after I spoke, came into this luncheon and spoke. So I'm here today to share a much different story than I shared at our first luncheon. At that luncheon, I shared my family's trauma and our experience of what we were going through at that time. And today, I want to share the hope of recovery and where we have come in the last 10 years with support of organizations like Stolen Youth. So I want to say that I am not a professional public speaker. I have done dozens of these speeches over the last 10 years and still feel very uncomfortable up here behind this podium. Jessika was recovered after 108 days. And I could not be prouder of the young woman that stands beside me. Her strength and her ability to overcome such trauma is an amazing event that not every survivor gets. She is a mother of 2 beautiful children, and she is truly my hero. Since 2010, I have fought alongside organizations and countless others in the fight of child sex trafficking. In 2011 and 12, we advocated for 12 different anti-trafficking bills here in the state of Washington. Some of those included increasing penalties for buyers, as well as the rights of victims to have their sentences vacated with criminal charges that related to child sex trafficking, giving them the power to take back their lives. In 2012, we also filed a civil lawsuit against Backpage.com. It was a website that hosted sexual exploitation of minors, including my daughter, and was knowingly profiting from the sale of sex of minors online. Wasn't long after that, in 2016, my family participated in the acclaimed documentary, I Am Jane Doe, which shone a critical spotlight on the outdated and dangerous protections that exist for websites hosting sexual solicitation online, made possible by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which essentially says that if you are an interactive computer server, you are not liable as a publisher or a speaker of any third-party content posted on your website. It was after a long and entwined battle that in 2018, my daughter and I were invited to the White House, and we saw meaningful change and an important win as FOSTA SESTA was signed into law by Congress, forever amending Section 230, with specific language that states that the website, which is knowingly hosting the sale of a child for sex, may be held responsible if found guilty in a court of law, also giving victims the right to sue these websites and make their lives whole again. It is often difficult for people to understand the weight and the battle that we went through over the last 10 years and the fight to protect our children. The injustices which my family endured and my daughter can be so strongly protected by law was incredible for me to see that laws protected these websites. It was just so hard for me to understand. And so often during the last 10 years, it has felt like my family was in a battle, a David and Goliath. And it wasn't until we were put in touch with organizations like StolenYouth and Youth Care and OPS and the incredible advocates here in this room that we finally had the tools that we needed, the sling in our hand to take down Goliath. And it was with their help and their support that we have continued to grow and heal over these last 10 years and to stand before you today as a family that is intact. Because so often what happens to child sex trafficking victims is their families are not intact by the end of it. And for us to be here today to celebrate this milestone with you is such an incredible opportunity for us, and we are so blessed and thankful. And I am here today to implore you to support this organization and the work that they do, so their leadership and their expertise can continue to help the next victims, because there is a next victim. And in the words of Nicholas, I'm gonna steal them, it's time to give a damn. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Jessica and Nacole, for being here today and for sharing your story. And also thank you for the amazing work that you've done to raise awareness and also bring important changes to the fight against child sex trafficking. I want to start by thanking every woman in the room today. As you probably have noticed, there are a lot of women in the room today. StolenYouth was started by a group of women, and this organization has been led and supported for a decade by women. And without the women in this room and the women who have come before, Stolen Youth would not be where it is today. So thank you for everything that you have done. I also want to thank every man in the room today. And actually, there are more of you than I thought there would be. And that's a really good surprise. And your support really means the world to Stolen Youth, because I know that this is not a comfortable place to be for a man necessarily, but your courage and your support really speaks volumes. My name is Alan Brown, and I've been on the Stolen Youth Board for 7 years. And as you look at me standing here, I'm clearly a middle-aged white guy. I am reasonably tech savvy, I own a small business, I live on Mercer Island, and I have 2 kids. And the reason I say this is that by all accounts, I pretty much represent the profile of an exploiter and a child sex trafficker. The fact is, 90% of buyers of children for sex are middle-aged white men. These exploiters, they can be our neighbors, our coworkers, our volunteer coaches, and apparently real estate agents. But the kids who are exploited, they are disproportionately children of color. And I just want to speak bluntly about this because this is an issue of power and privilege. It's pretty simple. It's racism, and it's a race issue, and that's something we have to recognize. As you're aware by now, this is Stolen Youth's 10-year anniversary. And 10 years ago, I was like many of you, I was in this room and I was a guest in the audience at my first Stolen Youth Luncheon. And boy, I did not know what I was in for. I knew a little bit about Stolen Youth, but I didn't know the first thing about child sex trafficking. But also like many of you, as I mentioned before, I'm a parent. I'm the proud father of 2 teenagers. My son is a high school senior. He's going to graduate in a few months, and my daughter is a high school junior. But 10 years ago, my kids were 6 and 8 years old. And while my partner and I adopted our kids at birth, some difficult circumstances put them within inches of being placed into foster care or being returned back to an unstable home with a history of drug abuse and domestic violence. And we know from a lot of research and a lot of data that those are perfect conditions for trafficking. So at my first luncheon, after learning about child sex trafficking, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started putting 2 and 2 together with my personal situation. I just felt overwhelmed. And all I really wanted to do was to leave this room and go home and hug my kids. I thought about how close, they could have been on a path to this life. But I knew I needed to do something, and so I turned that emotion into action. I donated what I could, I volunteered my time, and actually brought my kids to this luncheon on multiple occasions where they volunteered. They would help people find their seats at their tables, and it was a great experience for them. But in the end, even at a young age, they knew about child sex trafficking, and thank God they did. Last year, my daughter, who was 15 years old at the time, she received an unsolicited, explicit communication on Facebook from a 40-year-old man in upstate New York. And I can confirm that he knew how young she was, and she was not the only girl that he was pursuing. At the same time, last year, coincidentally, my son was approached by a woman online for grooming, or for sugaring, sorry. And he was 17 years old. And I cannot begin to express the anger I felt. I felt sick to my stomach that anyone would attempt to do this to my kids. But I'm here to tell you, make no mistake, this is happening every day in our backyard and in our homes. But I'll also tell you that I'm lucky because our situation is pretty exceptional. I knew about trafficking and my kids did too, and we shut that down right away. And as of today, you know about this too. But unlike us in this room, there are thousands of kids across our state who are vulnerable and who are in unstable situations. Some are in foster care, some are homeless with their families, and while there are others who've been thrown out of their homes. Many have been in abusive family relationships and are desperate. A lot of these kids are LGBTQ, and these kids, they're prime targets for trafficking, and they all need our help. But as you heard today, advocates on the streets, they reach these kids, and they save lives. Technology intercepts trafficking before it happens. Safe housing, safe jobs, and business training, they're all making a difference. These programs really do work. I mean, I've seen the numbers, I've seen the data. This stuff works. StolenYouth is the only organization in the state that is focused exclusively on ending child sex trafficking. And our coalition partners, they're absolutely the best in the country at what they do. So through our fundraising efforts, StolenYouth has the privilege of providing financial support to many of these programs. But we need to continue this. We need to raise this money so that we can prevent child sex trafficking before it happens, connect victims to the resources that they desperately need, and empower survivors to have a second chance at a life that was tragically taken from them. Thank you to Amazon for this amazing, incredible $50,000 matching gift. That is spectacular, and every single dollar that we raise here today really goes to making a difference for our kids. So please, rise up in your heart. Please give what you can so that those who are vulnerable and on the margins, our neighbors and our kids, so they can rise up once again. Our kids are counting on you. Table captains, if you would please pass out the envelopes at your table. I will say there are many ways to give. If you'd like to make a donation using a credit card, you can complete the donation online, following the instructions on the screen or on the front of the card. Thank you so much for coming today, for your support. It means so much to StolenYouth. Have a great afternoon.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I rise like the day. I rise unafraid. I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And I rise like the waves. I rise up in spite of the ache. I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move mountains. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise unafraid. I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. Yeah.